Welcome, 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 One Nation Tribal Alliance, brothers and sisters, friends and family, community, near and far, across the pond and this side of the pond. Welcome to our weekly Native Talk. Eve and I are here. Eve, you want to say your greetings?
Hi, everybody. Bonjour. I am Eve Howard. I'm a member of the Ojibwe tribe, and let's see, I come from White Earth, which is a band of Ojibwe in Minnesota, and I am an elder. I'm happy to say that because I didn't really think I would ever make it to being an elder. I had a lot of things that happened to me, not only like spiritual things, but like also like paranormal things. And I guess one of the things that we were going to talk about was O.B.Es and astral traveling. Um, I think it was like 2000, 2001. I was traveling myself in real life. I was going to Minneapolis and it was nighttime. And we took some back roads. And as we were coming, there was like a pasture, like a clearing. And then there were some trees. And we were coming along the side there and there was a fence and stuff. And then we had to go around the pasture and get on another road. And as we were turning, I glanced over into the darkness and there was like this blue orb. It was like this blue energy ball and it was huge. It was probably about 5 to 6 feet tall for the circumference. It was relatively wide and I could see through it. I could see the trees behind it and it was just kind of traveling slowly along the tree line in the back of the pasture. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to sound crazy. And my passenger or my driver was like, "Did you see that?" And it was like, "See what? What'd you see?" I didn't want to say nothing first. I wanted to hear what she had to say. And she said, "I saw a blue energy ball." Um, and I was like, "Yeah, that's what I saw too." And I didn't think anything of it and everything was fine, but probably I'd say pretty shortly after that, first thing that happened was my boyfriend at the time, my partner, he worked a graveyard. So I was like getting ready for bed as he was going to work. And I was laying there and he said, I was dozing off, getting really sleepy, and he's leaving. And probably didn't see much long after that. And I was still kind of slightly awake, but not too much. But I was laying there and it felt like somebody came up and was like rubbing my temples. And I was like, well, that kind of felt good. So I thought maybe my boyfriend came home and had come in and was like, oh, we don't need to work tonight, but I'm getting paid for it or something. And as the rubbing of the temples started to get more pressure because it was so light at first, I couldn't tell if it was like really happening or if I was just slightly dreaming it or what was going on. But I became aware that the pressure started to become more and more. And then instead of rubbing, it started to pull me off the bed. And I got scared and I couldn't move. It was like I was then when I became scared, I realized that I was like paralyzed. I couldn't move at all. And I remember just like being like this feeling of terror just went through me because it was like, what's going on? Am I being attacked by a spirit? What's happening? Um, and I managed to wake myself up. But I the next night I was kind of like leery about it. I thought, well, maybe it's if it's paranormal, I'll bring the dogs in the room with me and they can sleep on the floor and they'll alert me if anything happens or scare something away. So I put the dogs in the room and I fell asleep. And at the time, I didn't have any back surgery, so I could sleep on my stomach. And I'm like laying in bed, sleeping on my stomach. And it was like somebody came up and started pushing my face into the pillow. And I was like, I couldn't move again. This was the second night. And I'm being pushed into the pillow. I'm like freaking out because at any moment it's going to cover my face and I'm not going to be able to breathe. And the same thing that happened the night before. It was like I just fell asleep or something. I had just fallen asleep really fast. It was just like I was gone. And so I was getting kind of scared, and we had a guest bedroom for my daughters, and or anybody that came over. And so I had that room open, and I was like, I'm gonna sleep in there. Maybe it's the bedroom. So I slept in the bedroom, and I woke up, and the first thing I realized was that I was in the air, and I was pushing against the ceiling, and we had that spray on pokey ceiling texture. You know, if you've ever gone up there to hang up lights or anything, you put your hand up there, it's really pokey, and some of the pieces fall off. Well, I was pushing on it, pushing myself away, and the same thing happened again. I just like either left my body or I passed out. You know, either from fear or something was going on that I was not aware of at that time. So the next morning, I'm like freaked out really bad. And as I'm getting out of bed, I noticed that there's pieces of ceiling on my bed. And it was like I didn't even take that into account because I was just so freaked out. And I'm telling my partner this, and he's just like, he doesn't know what to think. You know, he's a very skeptical person. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He doesn't, you know, he didn't believe in UFOs. He didn't believe in nothing except for himself. And he doesn't know what to tell me. I don't know what to do. And so the fourth night, I slept out in the living room. And we didn't have a very big couch. We had like one of those lazy boy recliner love seats. And I curled up, and I like to face the couch because it kind of feels like, you know, so, you know, my back is facing outwards and I'm facing the back of the couch, and I'm sleeping. And I fall asleep, and all of a sudden I'm in this dream, but I'm like, it's not a dream. I'm like in the house. I'm in my house. And we had one of those old logging homes where there was like an L-shaped. So like the smaller L-shaped was the kitchen and the dining area. And then the longer part of the L was the living room. And I walk around from the kitchen into the dining room. And as I turn the corner, I look straight ahead and I see myself sleeping on the couch. And I just immediately just like, as soon as I saw myself, it was like something just like grabbed me, and it was just like, you know, hold me with this force right over to my body. And I slammed into my body. And, but it was like weird because there was like black smoke around me. I remember that part, but I slammed into my body, and I woke up, and I was like, all right, that's it. I'm done. And I jumped in my car. I drove over to my boyfriend's work, and I slept for a couple of hours in the car because I was too scared to go home and sleep in my own bed or in my own house. And this went on for, you know, I don't remember any other incidences other than the sleep paralysis. And sometimes there would be somebody present to my left. One time I did get a glimpse of what it was, and it was this made me immediately think of Scooby-Doo when they're like fighting these ghosts, and there's like this ghost made of energy and smoke. And you can see, instead of eyes, there's just these holes through the smoke, and I could see through its eyes. And it was standing next to the bed. And I started to like try to do all these experiments to try to come out of the sleep paralysis. And one of them was, you know, if I concentrated on moving like one little finger, or, you know, saying something too, if I could call out, I would wake myself up. And then I would, you know, wouldn't be so freaking terrified. And this went on for, I don't know, I think it went on for about 5 years, 4 years. And finally I was like watching, I was cleaning my bedroom, and I had the TV on, and I'm watching, you know, a daytime talk show. And I happened to see Sylvia Brown, and she is a psychic. And this woman was talking about the same exact thing going through. And I remember just like dropping everything, the vacuum, everything. And I went over, and I was like standing, you know, this close to the TV. And I'm just like, this is what's happening to me. And the woman asked the same, it was like she was reading my mind. She's like, am I having like a demonic attack? Am I having a spiritual attack? Am I, you know, something paranormal coming into my bedroom, attacking me in my sleep? what is it? And that's when Sylvia told her that she was having these experiences where she was like traveling, where she was like leaving her body. And she's like, you're not being attacked. She's like, this is, because you're tethered to your body. And she goes into it. And I was just finally, after years, and sometimes it wouldn't happen, but sometimes it would. And when it would happen, I was hearing like almost like a very faint buzz in my head, like very like a metallic-y type frequency buzz. And then it would get louder and louder. And then I could feel like something or someone or maybe my spirit, essence, soul, light leaving my body. But there's always this pain like right here. And I it hurts. And that's when it's being forcibly ripped from my body is when it hurts. Otherwise, if my star family comes or anything like that, it's always very loving and very, nurturing and familiar. I can usually tell who is in my room bothering me when, you know, when I'm like, just by the way that they approach me and stuff like that, I'm able to figure out who it is.
Wow, that must be quite an experience having to get kicked out of your own bed.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've all experienced out of body experiences, and you know, mine was, the very first time when I was, like I said, about maybe 5 years old. It's still, I mean, the only way I could explain to people about out of body experiences is that if you ever been in an accident, like a head on or whatever, your adrenaline is going so fast that every movement is like slow motion and your brain is comprehending every millisecond of what's going on step by step to where when it's all said and done, your mind's going to remember everything in detail. So, like I said, my first experience was when I was five years old, getting pushed off that slide, playing King of the Slide. You
Oh, yes.
And I hit that concrete block. And the first thing I said, "Oh man, did I break the block?" No, no, I didn't say that. I All I remember is that I was riding an ambulance, and I looked down and I saw my body on the gurney, and I was like floating beside it. I wasn't going to leave my body, and I don't know why, but I was not leaving my body. And they took me to the hospital, to the emergency room. I saw the doctors going crazy, and I saw everything, and you know, 3:20. Doctor says, time of death. And I said, huh? That's my body, time of death. But, and I was still floating there watching him. And he just put a sheet over the body and they started to roll it out, take it into the morgue. And as I guess, again, I said that there was a power cord across the floor. And whoever was rolling the gurney tried to ramp it. Boom, pushed it. Well, it hit it so hard that the gurney collapsed. When it collapsed, boom, I woke up. It's like from a sleep. I woke up, and the doctor came back, coming running back again, checked my pulse, checked this, checked that, and everything, and 4:30, I was walking out of the hospital. An hour later, I was walking out of the hospital with a big old bump on the back of my head, and and I still got that bump too. Kind of got a flat spot with a bump on it. And I said, somebody mashed my pumpkin. No. So that and the other one, most recent one is 2017 when I, you know, ate something I shouldn't have ate, and my body went septic, and all my major organs shut down. and I was in Zuni. I went to Zuni, drove all the way to Zuni by myself, got home, and my mother and my sister went to Albuquerque. My younger brother went to Grand Canyon. Everybody was gone except me. And I said, I don't feel good. Something is just not right. So I said, who's going to drive me to the hospital? I can't drive because I am so, like I said, sick real bad. So without hesitation, it's just like somebody tell me, call the ambulance, call the ambulance. So I called the ambulance, and of course they want the rural address. You know, back then, rural address system, but just barely got in the reservation. And I said, yeah, I live at, and I called my grandpa's name and everything. He says, well, what's your rural address? I don't know. I said, just come to so and so's house. Well, we need the rural address. I said, no, just come. And finally, one of the, I guess 911 dispatchers said, I know where that's at. I'll direct the ambulance over there. So they picked me up and took me to the hospital. Doctor looked at me and checked me out and says, you're having a heart attack. I said, I'm having a heart attack. No, I'm
Mm.
not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. I was arguing. But actually, the reason why I said that was because my heart was starting to shut down. Everything else had shut down. My kidneys shut down. My liver was getting to shut down, and my heart was ready to shut down too. So I said, wow, something ain't right. So anyway, they flew me to Albuquerque. And at Albuquerque, as soon as I got there, one of the first questions was, do you want to be resuscitated? If you die, you want to be resuscitated. If not, if you don't want to be resuscitated, we won't DNR you. You have to sign this form. I said, okay, because I don't want to be living on a machine if I survive
Mhm.
this heart attack, whatever. So, but before I could sign that paper, the next thing I know, I heard my sister standing there yelling at the doctor, do something, do something. Then I heard the doctor came up to her and says, who are you? And she said, I'm her sister. And he said, is he married? And she said, no. He says, well, you're next to family. He said he didn't want to be DNR'd, but he said, no, 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 you go ahead and resuscitate him now. So while they were working on me, I said, I'm dead. I'm up here. My body's down there. And I said, I'm dead. So I looked around. I said, where's the great white light people talk about?
Mhm.
Nothing. And I said, well, uh, you know, what next? And I said, I hope what I did on earth was better than good than bad to where I can go to the great white light. Still nothing. And then back of my mind is somebody saying, call upon Jesus. So I said, okay, Jesus, forgive me of what I done and have mercy on my soul. And that's when the portal opened up. I don't know who or what said, come on, reach down and pulled me in that portal. And then I guess I crossed over. And when I crossed over, I said, wow, this feels great. And I looked around. I said, what are those things? They're beautiful. And whoever brought me in said, those are angels. Those are guardian angels. And I said, well, I thought angels have halos and wings. And they said, only when they go down there. When he pointed, where he pointed at, I looked through it. I looked through the portal and I saw Earth slowly moving, just peacefully moving. I said, wow, really? He said, yeah, but those are beautiful. And the things that we don't see that we know exist, like wind. Always talk about wind. You can blow on your hand and feel the wind hit your hand. We can feel the wind coming, but where does the wind come from? What is wind? How does it start? How do we get that 80-mile-an-hour wind in New Mexico? You know,
Mhm.
somebody must be mad or something, or turbo must have loose. But, I could see the wind just slowly passing by peacefully. And I said, wow, what is that? I said, that's the wind. And I looked around and I saw people's energy, and I said, "Wow, this is great. I want to stay here." I said, "You can't." I said, "Why not? It's not your time." I said, "Well, if it's not my time, uh, can I wait here until my time comes?" Nope, gotta go back. Go back. Why do I want to go back? It's rough down there. No, you gotta go back. I said, "Okay, I'll go back. I'll be God's preacher. I'll be a minister. I'll be an evangelist. What does he want me to do?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "Nothing." He said, "Yeah, nothing." So I said, "No, if I go back, there's got to be something for me to do." And then all they said was just follow the gospel. I didn't know what a gospel was. Never read the Bible. Didn't know what a gospel was. So I said, "Okay, uh, but do I need to go now?" He said, "Yeah, it's your time to go back. Time to go back." I said, "Okay." So I got ready, and as they were escorting me out, I saw my dad, my sister, and my younger brother. They've already passed on. And my dad looked at me and said, "Tell Mama I'm patiently waiting for her."
Mm.
And my sister looked at me and says, "Tell my girls to behave. I'm watching over them every day." And my youngest brother says, "Tell my daughter I love her and she's beautiful. I watch over her every day." And I said, "Wow, even though I've never met her, she's a beautiful lady." I said, "Wow." I said, "Okay, I will." And it's like when I went through the portal, boom, I woke up. My eyes just opened up. And all them doctors were just going crazy, just stopped. Everything just stopped. They all looked at me. And they're all talking to me, but I couldn't answer because I was already intubated. I had all kinds of needles and plugs. It's like I was plugged up and everything, laying there. And I said, wow. So, you know, with that experience, I said, follow the gospel, follow the gospel. So what it was telling me is that live the spiritual life, you know, and everybody says, talk about Jesus, religion, and all this. I said, let me ask you a couple questions. I tell these people that are in religion, I said, what religion did Jesus follow? We got all these churches, with
Mm.
all these big humongous churches. Which church is Jesus, when is Jesus going to come again? Which church is he going to preach at? Oh, we got this beautiful cathedral. I said, no, he's not going to go no preach at no church. He preached in the streets where the people are. He didn't preach in no church, you know? And so, I read the first four books in the New Testament, you know, and so all he talked about was, you know, having a spiritual life. Jesus did not have religion. So I started following and I started connecting what I was taught in my younger years to now and what I learned from different cultures when I traveled the world. Everything has the same meaning. That is, raise your vibration. When you raise your vibration, which we're going to go into the next topic, which is going to, like I always say, the first three chakras are the earthly chakras. It's a fire. Triangle is fire in alchemy symbology. Fire, heat rises. So when you know who you are, know your spirit, and know your power of your mind, you go into your heart chakra, which is transformation. So the earthly chakras are going to go into your heart chakra, which you are transformed. And then when you are transformed, you go into the esoteric chakra, which is your throat, your pineal, and your crown. And that's going to prepare you to go into the astral chakra, the Buddha consciousness, and all that. Astral chakra. And that's where, you know, we go into astral traveling. Now, in the esoteric chakra, which is throat, pineal, and your crown, it's preparing you. your earthly chakra prepared you to your heart, and it's preparing you to go into your esoteric chakra, which things happen, remote viewing, shape shifting, psychic surgery, you can do that. And all these things, that's the magic that book of, that book, the Bible talks about. Heaven on earth. That's the thing that Thoth talked about in the Emerald Tablet. That which is above corresponds with that which is below to bring that one thing, magic. In other words, so what that tells me is if now, as a spiritual person, when I meditate or ground, I make sure I connect with the Creator, Father, and Mother Earth. Even though they are present with us at all times, it's just that we need to stay connected with them to get up to that level of higher
Mhm.
consciousness. And, when I astral traveled the first time and came back, you know, one of my elders, well, all my elders were telling me, you got to be careful with yourself when you astral travel. And I said, why is that? He said, well, we protected you while you were astral traveling. So we know you are protected. But when you do it, you know, a lot of people tell me, I like to astral travel. I do that. I said, fine, that's great. That's wonderful. It is a wonderful experience. But, you know, one of the things that they were telling me is that, they cringe. My elders used to cringe when they find out that we are drilling below in Mother Earth or a spaceship goes up in space. They cringe. And I said, why do y'all do that? He said, because when you go deep down underground, in the spiritual realm, if you go, you can go up, you can go down. When you go into the hall of darkness, like this, Thoth was talking about, the dark side of a mantis. When you
Mhm.
go in there, there's a lot of dark stuff going on. A lot of dark things are on you. And if you touch it, you know, dark is transferring. So it's going to get on you or get in you. The same as going up. If you go up into the space, they cringe because I said, why y'all cringe? He said, because there ain't no telling what kind of disease is up there that they're bringing down. Because do you ever see them? Even this last spaceship that SpaceX went to go rescue those, you know, pilots that they were stranded up there from the previous administration. You know, they went to go get them, and when they brought them back, you don't see them, you know, cleaning that spaceship before they put it on the ship or sanitizing it because there's no telling what you're going to bring back down. Well, that's the same way with your spiritual traveling, astral traveling. You got to protect yourself. You got to cleanse yourself because there's no telling what you're going to bring down or bring up from the underground. Because there was a lot of underground mining. There was and back home, when uranium mines were operating full strength. I remember I used to get scared for these people. They'd have like a little 6x6 cart, and it's like the old fashioned elevator. They all jump in it. There'll be like 5 or 6 guys jump in it, and that little thing, and cable drops them down. And how far do they go down? Oh, about 20 stories. That deep. And they're down there all night. Their whole 8 hours or 12-hour shift mining uranium. When they get done, they come up, boom, they get hauled up, bring another batch down. And when they come back up, like I said, what are they bringing back up? What kind of disease? What kind of, negativity? You know, because we don't know. We don't know. So, you know, I'll let you go ahead. I'm sorry. I
Well,
get carried
I
away.
I I totally agree with you too because I remember having this conversation with my medicine man and he was asking me questions. I think in a lot of ways it was really weird because I should have been asking him questions, but he was asking me questions. Um different things on as a healer, how do I feel pain? He was like, when, he's like, you leave your body at night, right? And I was like, yeah, how'd you know? And he's like, you know, he didn't answer any questions, but he was asking me questions, and he's like, do you protect yourself? He's like, because when you leave your body, he's like, there are physical and spiritual things, these dark entities, and he even called them demons. He said that are out there waiting for the opportunity to be able to have a host body. And when you leave your body, you're leaving your body open, for any type of attachments or anything like that. And I was like, seriously, so he gave me, I had a medicine bag, and I used to wear like a kind of like it wasn't really a bra, but it was like a tank top, and it was tight. And I would just tuck it into my shirt at night, before I go to bed. This started probably about 8 years ago. Once I sobered up off of alcohol and any type of like drugs or even prescription drugs that I was using. I mean, I think of all those times. I think back on them, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I left my body just completely open to whatever. And, there would be times where I would just like my anger would just get so bad. And I would see like this red mist around my eyes. And it was just like, oh man, I'd be so mad. And it was like, my mother was always like concerned about, are you going to end up in prison because you're going to do something stupid? And it's like this whole time I'm like, traveling around, and I would go places, or else I would, they would come and get me, and then they would like vibrate me to get through like physical, like walls and roofs and stuff, and to get me through. And um yeah, I think it was like, what was it, 3 years ago? Not quite 3 years ago. And it was like probably around January of 2023. And I had been on this like a video chat with someone, and they're like, what is up in the corner of your room? And this isn't my apartment, but just imagine there was like this spot, and I even have pictures of it, and I was like doing different like lenses, and it was showing up like this blotch. But what it was a portal, or it was like a hole in my ceiling. And one night I just got sucked up into it, and I got sucked up, and I was like popped out. And I was like, oh, I was like, it was cold out, but I wasn't feeling the cold. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm just gonna go for a little flying. So I just took off, and there was like like a main street, main drag or whatever. And I went straight down there, and it was about 33 blocks. I went and checked it. 33 blocks. I turned around, and I like levitated, and like the whole town was like all sleeping, and like not very many lights. And I was like, you know what? I need to get back, because what if someone discovers me missing? Because to me, it felt so real, you know? And I flew back, and I remember going, there was like stop lights that were green. I went past my bank that I banked at. I went past the mall where I go and I get my pizzas on Fridays. It was really strange. And then I get down there, and I'm like back, poof, just right back into my body again. But it was to me, it was very freeing. And after that, I decided that I was going to be doing protection, because you can't just leave your body like that. And we don't even know how long that we leave it like that either. So I think it's before I go to bed, and I do this for anyone who's in the house, or in my home. um Assign them, like, they have an archangel that they go into the astral with, and there's also another one that watches over their body, because I'm aware that there are things that attach and can possess a body. So it's like it's really necessary to have that protection, and I've never had any issues. um I can tell when I'm going to like leave my body, because it's like the whole back of my skull right here, it just tingles like to my ears, and I can feel it tingling, and I try really hard to stay awake for it, but you need to shut down to be able to go. And that's kind of, I haven't been able to stay awake and feel myself leaving. When I was, I think probably in my 30s, it was like I was going almost every single night, and I would feel myself, and it was funny sometimes when I was like drifting out of my body. Sometimes my feet would be higher than my head, so I would feel like I was like, ugh. um or one time they picked me up and I was upside down. I could feel myself. I could literally feel my skin moving on the sheets, and they were doing it so gently. And they were like trying not to wake me up, even though I was like slightly awake. And I could feel them pulling me across the sheets. And I thought, am I gonna hit the ground? I was like, are they gonna let me go? And I'm just gonna poof. And then they lifted me completely upside down, and my head was down. I could even feel my hair like hanging. And I wasn't there very long. And then they just kind of like how you do when you get a suit out of the closet or a jacket and you lay it on your bed. That's kind of what they did. They just kind of laid me very gently down. And it was like, oh, that was so peaceful, because it's a lot better than getting jerked around or having a lot of pain and separating. I don't know if there's like some sort of a weird attachment that your soul has in your body, but I can physically feel where when they're pulling it out, it's like hurts right here. Kind of like when you're in high school and you're doing the mile and you're pushing yourself, and that weird pain here when you're trying to breathe afterwards. That's kind of how it feels to me anyway. Other people may feel it differently.
Well, I had a thought about when you were talking, and that is that, when we experience all these things in life, in spiritual and physical realm, we have to stop and think, why? Why are we doing? A lot of people that I have worked with, when they astral travel, you know, I always tell them, I said, please protect and cleanse yourself, because we don't want you to bring a space bug down here and let it eat you up, whatever, But, I said, because the dark is everywhere, whether you go up in space, whether you down in the gutters, whatever, but, it's everywhere. And, you know, I always tell them, have protection, call upon your guides. If not, have somebody there with you. And if you, because you're leaving your avatar, like your car. If you got a Mercedes Benz with keys in it, starting, and there's nobody around, you're up there enjoying the astral travel, and your avatar is down here with the keys in it, motor running, and I'm not saying, but the dark might come by and say, "Hey, there's a car right there. There's an avatar body right there. Let's go check it out." Boom. They go in and you come back. Guess what? You come in, you got riders or visitors. So, and a lot of people says, wow, I've had people come back, you know, saying, I said, were you, well, so and so was supposed to take care of me, but they got mad and left me alone. And they come back. I had people, friends that be sick for like 5 or 6 days, couldn't eat, couldn't even get out of bed, and thinking that they got COVID, they're ready to give it up or whatever. But, it was during that process that the dark is incubating in his system, in the avatar, while he was laid out cold, because he was so sick that he could call upon his spiritual guides. He could call upon this. He could call upon that. And when his sister finally called me, he says, could you come check what's going on? When I walked in, I felt coldness. the room temperature in the living room, the kitchen, it was nice, 72 degrees, hot, nice and warm. Took my jacket off. I was nice, warm. As soon as I got close to him, even just opened the door, the room temperature was still great, but I felt that coldness from his body on me. And I said, wow, okay, okay. And, we need to get rid of these astral parasites. Whatever it is, you need to get rid of it. So I did. You know, wormwood's good for it. Wormwood,
Mm-hmm.
get some fresh wormwood. That's good. So I started working on it. Took me almost 32 hours of just working with him, talking to him, bringing him back away from out of the dark, talking to him, bringing him, come on, follow me. You know, let me help you. I'm here to help you. You trust me, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
His spirit did not know who my spirit was, but physically he knew who I was just by my voice. So I said, come on, come follow me, come follow me. So even though we speak telepathically in spirit world, every once in a while, like you said, to wake yourself up, you have to say something verbally to wake yourself up. So to wake him up, I say something to him in verbal. I said, "Oh, you remember that time we went horseback riding and you fell off and about broke your leg, and I'm the only one that brought you McDonald's." No, but I would tell him all that, and I try to bring back his memory to where he would snap out of that darkness. And finally, when he snapped out of that darkness, he says, "I am starving." But it took a lot of wormwood, took a lot of prayer, took a lot of connection, meditation, grounding, everything, you know. And, you know, I had to ground for him, but I would make sure his hand was on my shoulder when I ground. So, he was with me when we grounded. When I did cleansing, I had to make sure he was touching me so we would both be cleansed. And I was cleansing him when I cleansing myself, And so when things like that happen, you have to really understand your energy, your spiritual life, your connection to the Creator, Father, Mother Earth, your guides. You got to call upon them, whether they're angels, space beings, whomever they are, the positive light. Call upon them. And, because yes, astral traveling is great, but, please protect and cleanse yourself when you get back,
Mm-hmm.
and it just become a daily thing where when I get up, my meditation, you know, I come down, I go down, I meditate, and I usually sit down, meditate before I get up. Okay, what's the plan of the day? No. What do you want me to do today? But I don't. And you got to be careful what you ask for too. If I say, okay, what are we going to do today? Boom, they'll flood me. But if I say, okay, we're going to have a wonderful, beautiful day. It'll be a wonderful, beautiful. When you meditate and start saying, you can say, I'm going to have a beautiful day. We're going to have a beautiful day. That day is going to be beautiful. But if you say, okay, what next? Boom. Yeah, what next is going to be, that's it. Again, cleansing and protecting yourself is very, very important, because, we don't know what's going to happen. So all I ask is that you know, this out of body experiences that we have, it's great, but,
Mm-hmm.
you know, be careful, be
Exactly.
careful, and, you know, understand, your vibration, you're raising your energy, understand that, understand who you are. We all have a purpose on Mother Earth. We all have a purpose. And she needs us. And All I can say is that, if you need help with cleansing and protecting, Eve is here. Oh,
Yeah, I do that.
yeah. So,
What was I gonna say? Oh, I think it was like a couple of years ago. I think it was right around the time that my dad was getting sick. And this is why it's really important for people to keep their vibration up, because at that time, I was scared, I was fearful, my dad was really sick. And um I opened myself up to an attack because my vibration was really low. I was at my house and I went to sleep, and I'm dreaming. And in my dream, I'm assuming it was a dream, I was in this house and I was there with my mother. And anyone who knows me knows that my mother and I are estranged right now. And which was really an odd dream because we were like talking. And we were in a 2-story house, and she's like, "Is somebody on the second floor? I can hear somebody walking around up there." And I said, "No, nobody is." And I opened up a closet and I could hear something fall. And I was like, "Well, sounds like there's somebody up there." So I happened to catch somebody turning light on and off on the stairs, but I couldn't see who it was. So we're making this bed in the living room. And it was a queen size bed, and we're like putting sheets on it and putting blankets. And we're getting ready to lay down and go to sleep, which made me think it wasn't a dream, because you normally don't go to sleep in your dream. But I did. I laid down, and just as I was about, I closed my eyes and I got comfortable, my mother pokes me and she's like, "Who's that? Who is that?" And I like peek over the blankets and I see this young girl, and she's got kind of tangly, dirty hair. It's like kind of dirty blonde, and it's a little bit long, like probably about down to here. And I see her go into the bathroom and she shuts the door, and I was like, "Oh, that's so and so." And my mom's like, "Okay." So I get back comfortable again, and I'm just falling asleep. And all of a sudden, something jumps on me. And they jumped on me. They jumped on top of my chest and my torso. And they had put their arms on, and I had the blanket over my face for some reason, but they got on top of me and they pinned the blanket over my face. And I am in straight sleep paralysis again. Except for this time, it like kind of startled me when somebody jumped on me, but I immediately I could smell like a match burning. I could smell that sulfur. I could smell an unwashed body. I could smell like a really sour smelling body, and like dirty hair, and BO, and I could smell this. And it's on top of me now. If I had pulled the blanket down, that person's face would have been right here in front of mine. So immediately I do the one thing that, as a former paranormal investigator, um, and a former Christian as well, a Catholic, I go into a prayer. And I realize that, a lot words have power. And just because I'm not a practicing Catholic or a Christian doesn't mean that prayer doesn't have the power that I believe it to have, which I believe it has massive amount of power. And I started in on Our Father, and I'm going all the way through to the very end, and I'm doing it really fast in my head, but I'm like, I'm going through the prayer, and I get done, and I was like, I finished the prayer, and I was like, "And get the F off me." And I screamed this. And immediately it was like someone just came and lifted this thing off me, because it was just like all the pressure was gone off my chest, the blankets, everything. I could move. And I jumped up, like threw the blankets off, and I was expecting something to be there in the room with me. So I'm like in full fight mode. I'm like, "Where are you?" I'm ready to fight. And there's nothing there with me, but I could still smell that thing. I could smell it in my bedroom. I could smell the sulfur. I could smell the BO. I could smell the sourness of their body, or of its body, or of its spiritual body, whatever it was. I truly believe that it was a demonic attack. And You know, I fought it off,
Hmm.
and I knew I would. Because you have to have no fear. And it's really hard to say that when something jumps on you. And I don't think it was like it scared me. I think it just startled me because I was almost asleep. Almost sleeping in my dream, almost falling asleep in my dream. But yeah, that was, and that's how powerful. I mean, I was able to defend an attack when it was happening, when I was still asleep. So I was very aware of what was going on, and I was able to know what to do. I was able, and not to be afraid, because these things, once you come into your power, they have none.
Yeah.
They can try to influence you, or they can go through another person, but they don't have that power over you once you no longer fear them.
Hmm.
And everybody, if we got to that point, we wouldn't have to worry about it. I mean, we'd still get attacked, but we would know what to do.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to, come up with their own way, because maybe, an atheist who was never brought up in the church, can't use that prayer. Maybe something else, like you were talking about, like, you know, something that you have strong belief in. So if you have this necklace that your father gave you or your mother gave you when you were 5 years old, and it's been in the family, that is your talisman. That is your safe point. Your maybe it was something that your mother said to you every night before bedtime, or your family motto, or something. Anything that you believe has power.
Hmm. Yes. Anything that, I guess, yes, everything and anything you resonate with, that you believe in, that you have faith in, you know, that will protect you. Because if it resonates with you, if you have faith in it, I don't care what it is. It could be as simple as this napkin or Kleenex. You have faith that it's going to protect you because it's white, it's pure, and everything, and you put it all into that. It will protect you. And and the most of all, like Eve said before, do not fear. Do not fear the dark because that is their strength. And another thing is, do not argue with the dark because when you argue, guess what? You're bringing out negative energy and they're
Right.
eating off of that and they're going to get power off of you when you start arguing with it. Be nice to
I
it.
laugh.
Be nice to it. I've got a friend that used to tell me that, when the dark comes after me and all that, I just turn around and I look at him. I said, I love y'all with open arms. And you watch them run. They
Uh-huh.
don't want to be
I've done
loved.
that.
They don't want to be. I love y'all because he says, understand, which I understand. He says, understand, even the demons are Father's creation. Because where did they come? How did Lucifer? He was an angel. He's a fallen angel. So he's a creator from the Father. So if you try to give him love, they're going to run. Try to give them positive energy. They're going to be your light. Be strong. And even if you have to stomp your foot and whatever, but just that's
Mm-hmm.
why I say, when you have your hands open, you tighten up your gut, you can feel your energy come out of there. You're a Spider-Man or a Spider-Woman for your you scare them, you shock them, but just whatever you use for protection or whomever you call upon for protection, you know, give them your 120% faith, understanding that they are here to protect you because our guides and protectors are like hovering over us constantly, wherever we go, wherever we do. And they will not come upon us until we call upon them. We have to call upon them. They just
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, Eve is going to fall over there. We better go and help her." No, if Eve knows she's going to fall, she better call upon us. So, I mean, I've had a lot of people tell me. I had a friend that said, you know, she said that one day I was climbing down the stairwell and I knew I was going to fall off that stairwell. It's a long stairwell. He said, I knew I was going to fall and probably break half the handrail trying to control myself. But he said, I knew I was going to fall. But as soon as I saw myself falling, I called upon my guides when I got down to the bottom of the stairwell, I was not hurt. I was not in pain. I said, wow, it's just like somebody picked me up and put me down. And I said, that's because you called upon your guides within your full heart and soul. Your mind, body, and soul has to call upon them. That's your trinity. That's your wholeness. Your mind, body, and soul. That's your main engine. You know, you know. So we can go in more about this and all this, but it'd be another podcast
Yeah.
about how. But we're gonna come up with all this. But I like this title about you
Yeah.
know out of body experience and astral traveling, and we're just giving you all basically the tip of the iceberg of what we have gone through. When you are awakened, you start learning about your energy and all these kind of stuff. Great things happen. You're light. Yeah, it gets challenged, but after a while, you just kind of brush it off. In the beginning, scared and all this kind of stuff, yeah. But once you learn about that you are connected, you are part of the source. You call upon the source. He's right there with you. Boom. I mean, as I tell people, we know how fast the speed of light is, but how fast is the speed of dark?
That's right. For all those people that wonder, you know, I wonder who my spirit guide is. I used to wonder that too. And then one day I was like, well, did I ever ask for them to show themselves to me? No, I never did. So I asked my guardian angel, my spirit guide, my protector, will you show yourself to me? And it was really weird because it was like it wasn't exactly after that moment, but it was very close. And all of a sudden this being of light, and I had my eyes closed because I was meditating too. And I saw this being of light in front of me. And he had this beautiful sword, and he like showed it to me. And on the sword, and I read it from bottom to top, there were like these symbols. Like they were, and I mean I've tried to find them and I've not been able to. But they were like symbols that were etched on his blade, and I didn't know who he was. So I think I brought him somewhere, or I brought him up because I was like feeling kind of, and someone who had a very intuitive spiritual gifts saw him and said, "You realize that that's the Archangel Michael, right?" And I was like, No." And I was like, "Does he have a sword?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, because I'm not religious." And that's the thing. You don't have to be religious. I am a spiritual person. I pray, but I pray anywhere, everywhere. I don't go to a certain place to pray. If I want to go out and be in the creator's light, I go out into nature because that's where I feel closest to the creator. And people were like, I feel so bad for you because you're not religious, or you're Christian. Don't feel bad for me. Please don't. I feel like I've come to find what I have been searching for my whole life, and that was answers. Even though deep inside I already had the answer, it was like when I found out what it was like, oh well, shoot, I already knew that.
Well, true. Uh, what you're sharing, and I guess just to add on is that you know know yourself,
Mm,
know yourself, and prayer is basically talking to yourself, and when you talk to yourself, because you remember, you again, Jesus said, "I'm in the Father's in me. I am in you, you are in me, you are in the Father. We are one."
mm-hmm.
So that just tells me that we are talking to ourselves. That's in John 14:20. Anybody want to find that out? It's in Book of John, chapter 14, verse 20. When when he's talking about when the disciples asked him, "Are we ever going to see the Father?" Anybody that sees me sees the Father. Anybody that sees himself sees the Father. What he was telling him. So we are the image of the Creator.
Exactly.
We
To
are
look
the
upon our
part.
face is to look upon the image of the Creator.
Yeah. So, we are valuable in His eyes. I mean, all I can say is that, feel free to be spiritual because it's unlimited. You're not boxed in to do whatever the religious tells you to do or what they want you to believe. You're not boxed into that. You're
Mm.
opened up to pray anytime and you can pray 24/7, not just Sunday at 1 hour and Wednesday at 2 hours, whatever. You know, you should be in constant prayer, constant connection. And that's the only way to shine your light. Because when you shine your light, people are going to come to you, you know,
That's right.
because they want that light. They feel that light. Even the animals, the meanest dog could walk by and I just put my hand down, said, I love you, and watch that dog come and smell my hand. Next thing you know, it's all over me
Hmm.
because that dog wants my energy, feels my energy. And, you know, it's like you said, I used to have a cat. We have our own guardians. My grandma is my guardian because when I get myself in a bind, I could smell her. I start smelling mothballs. Back in the old days, they used to put their clothes in a trunk and put mothballs in it. So when they put on their clothes, guess what? They smell like
Like
mothball.
mocktails.
Yeah. So when I get myself in a bind, I smell mothball. I said, "Thank you, Grandma. Thank you," because my grandma raised me. I know she's right there with me. Her angel. That my grandma angel is right there.
They
You
took
know.
all my grandmas from me. They all passed away before I died, or before I died, before I was born. So I didn't get to meet any of them, which makes me feel sad. It did make me feel sad for a long time, and then all of a sudden, I think it was after, oof, must have been after I sobered up. I started to like talk to my grandma, like like she was here, and I felt like this. I remember once I was outside and I was like really upset, and I can't remember what it was that I was upset about. And I just said, will you put your arms around me and hold me? And I felt this someone come behind me and put their arms around me from behind and just held me. And it was the most comforting thing, and just and I couldn't even ask my parents what their parents were like because they were orphans, you know. They didn't know. But I know what and I remember when my father was passing away, when I went to go see him the night that he passed away, there was all kinds of relatives in the house. They were waiting for him. And I said, my grandma's here. I can feel her. My dad's mom. But you just got to be sensitive to that kind of thing. I mean, have an open mind. That is like the best tool that you can have, is having an
Mhm.
open mind and listening to people when they talk and they go through these experiences. And then looking back on some of the experiences in your life and thinking, well, maybe it wasn't as cut and dried and as logical as I thought it was. Could it have been spiritual? Yes. I
Mhm.
mean, I have stories I could go on, but like you said, it would be another show.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, that just basically ran out a little over our hour time, but we just do this because we love y'all and we want to share what it is to be in the light. And we ask that, you know, we're here if you want to experience it, if you want to learn it, if you want to understand it. Eve and I are here, and you can find Eve at where?
You can find me on Facebook, Eve Howard. You can find Rising Spirit, which is my healing business, or my little business going on the side. And then I also have Prime Declassified and Prime Indigenous, which are both on Rumble, and you'll find that under Prime Declassified Podcast on Rumble, also on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. So you can find me everywhere if you just look.
All right. Well, and you can find me at One Nation Tribal Alliance on Facebook or One Nation Tribal Alliance YouTube. And we'll also have a website, which is healthy and harmonious lifestyle.com. And we are under our website is under that title, which is healthy and harmonious lifestyle.com. All one word, all lower lettering. And so feel free to get a hold of us. I mean, we're here and I have a mentorship going on. If you like to join, uh, get on our website, healthyandharmoniouslifestyle.com, and under mentorship, click on and we'll get you, sign up and we'll reach out to you. And, you know, if $1.11 is too much, let me know. I can waiver that. So no hard feelings, but we had to put something because of our search engine. So anyway, again, you can find us and thank you for watching One Nation Tribal Alliance, Native Talks. And till next week, y'all have a wonderful, blessed day. And thank you. Like and subscribe our channel. We love y'all. Bye
Love
bye.
you.